history, the event which may appear as a catastrophe saves persons or an idea, elevating it into a myth. Remember the intervention of the Soviet Army and other Warsaw Pact armies in 1968 in Czechoslovakia to strangle the so-called Prague Spring, the attempt of the Czech Democratic Communists to introduce a more human-face socialism. Usually, we perceive this brutal Soviet intervention as something that destroyed the brief dream of Prague Spring. I think it saved the dream. Either Czechoslovakia would have turned into an ordinary liberal capitalist state, or at a certain point, which was usually the fate of reformist communists, the communists in power would be obliged to set a certain limit. Okay, you had your fun, your freedom, that's enough. Now we again define the limits. Again, the paradox is that precisely the Soviet intervention saved the dream of the possibility of another communism and so on and so on. So here again, and the last story, but all this, which is quite acceptable for our liberal progressive minds, all this is just a trap. Something to lower our attention threshold, as it were, to open us up, to be ready to accept the true conservative message of rich people having the right to revitalize themselves by ruthlessly appropriating the vitality of the poor people. The couple has a long history in Hollywood. Whatever the story is about, it may be about the end of the world, an asteroid threatening the very survival of humanity, or a great war, whatever. As a rule, we always have a couple whose link is threatened and who somehow, through this ordeal, at the end, happily gets together. This logic does not hold only for Hollywood films.
Где это мы? Это мы под домом Гиммлера. Вот он, Рейхстаг.
In the late 40s, in Soviet Union, they produced arguably one of the most expensive films of all times, The Fall of Berlin, the chronicle of the Second World War from the Soviet standpoint. And it's incredible how closely this film also follows the logic of the production of a couple. The story begins just before the German attack on Soviet Union, when a model worker who is in love with a local girl but is too shy to propose to her is called to Moscow to get a medal from Comrade Stalin.
Я знаю, товарищ.
There, Stalin notices his confusion, distress, and Stalin gives him some advice, which poetry to quote, and so on. This part, unfortunately, was lost because in the background of this scene, there was Beria, a Soviet politician who, after Stalin's death, became a non-person, was shot as a traitor, but we know from the screenplay what was there. If Stalin gives you a love advice, it has to succeed, so the couple embraces.
Наташа! Иди сюда!
He carries her probably to make love. At that very moment, there is the triumphant, violent entrance of the obstacle. German planes come dropping bombs.
Молчать!
Наташа! Наташенька! Ничего.
The girl is taken prisoner.
Эти рабы получат крепких немецких хозяев.
The boy, of course, joins the Red Army, and we follow him through all the great battles. The idea being that, in a deeper logic of the film, what these battles were about was really to recreate the couple. The boy has to get his girl. This is what happens at the end, but in a very strange way, which reconfirms Stalin's role as the supreme divine matchmaker. The scene itself, Stalin immersing himself into a crowd of ordinary people, never happened. Stalin was totally paranoid about flying, about taking planes. But nonetheless, when he saw this scene, he cried.
Товарищи, сегодня мы празднуем великую победу над германским фашизмом.
Of course, he himself, as we know, wrote the lines. When the couple encounters each other, the girl first sees Stalin, then she turns around and, surprised, sees her lover, for whom she was waiting all the time of the war. So it's only through the presence of Stalin that the couple gets reunited.
Алёша? Алёша!
Наташа!
This is how ideology works. Not the explicit ideology of the film, which we hear at the end, Stalin saying now all the free people will enjoy peace and so on, but precisely ideology at its more fundamental. This apparently totally subordinated motive, unimportant in itself, the story of a couple, this is what is the key element which holds the entire film together, that small surplus element which attracts us, which maintains our attention. This is how ideology works.
Nice. Everything clean. Oiled. So that your action is beautiful. Smooth, shiny.
We usually think that military discipline is just a matter of mindlessly following orders, obeying the rules. You don't think you do what is your duty. It's not as simple as that. If we do this, we just become machines. There has to be something more. This more can have two basic forms. The first, more benign form is an ironic distance, best epitomized by the well-known movie and TV series MASH.
Hawkeye?
Where the military doctors are involved in sexual escapades,
Luke said you better haul ass home quick.
make jokes all the time. Some people took Robert Altman's movie MASH even as a kind of an anti-militaristic, satiric product. But it's not. We should always bear in mind that these soldiers, with all their practical jokes, making fun of their superiors and so on, operated perfectly as soldiers. They did their duty.
This one's for you, babe. Nice.
Much more ominous is a kind of obscene supplement to pure military discipline. In practically all movies about the US Marines, the best known embodiment of this obscenity are marching chants, a mixture of nonsense and obscenity. This is not undermining, making fun of military discipline. It is its innermost constituent. You take this obscene supplement away and military machine stops working.
Well, no shit. What have we got here? A fucking comedian, private joker. I admire your honesty. Hell, I like you. You can come over to my house and fuck my sister. You little scumbag! I got your name. I got your ass! You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you. Now get up. Get on your feet. You had best unfuck yourself or I will unscrew your head and shut down your neck. Sir, yes, sir. Private Joker, why did you join my beloved corps?
I think that the drill sergeant, the way it is played in an exemplary way in Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, that the drill sergeant is rather a tragic figure. I always like to imagine him as a person who, after his work, returns home, is quite decent, and so on.
Here's my rifle, this is my gun!
All his obscene shouting is just a show put on not so much to impress ordinary soldiers whom he is training, as to bribe them with bits of enjoyment.
Here's my rifle, this is my gun!
It's not just a question of these obscenities which sustains the military machinery. It's another more general rule which holds for military communities, but even more, I would say, for all human communities, from the largest nations, ethnic groups, up to small university departments and so on. You don't only have explicit rules. You always, in order to become part of a community, you need some implicit, unwritten rules which are never publicly recognized, but are absolutely crucial as the point of the identification of a group. In the UK, everyone knows about the obscene, unwritten rituals which regulate life in public schools.
Oh, thank you, Finchley. I want to see your whips in my study after break. Right, sir. Oh, how was India? Enjoy it? Jolly good. Bridget!
I'll labor night and day.
Just think about Lindsay Anderson's classic If. The public life is democratic. We have professors who interact with their pupils, nice atmosphere, teaching, friendship, spirit of cooperation. But then we all know what happens beneath the surface. Older pupils torturing, sexually abusing the younger, this same mixture of obscenity and sadistic violence. And again, what is crucial here is we should not simply put all the blame or all the enjoyment on the older pupils. The victims even are part of this infernal cycle of obscenity. It is as if in order to really be a member of a community, you have to render your hands dirty. And I think that even the Abu Ghraib scandal of American soldiers torturing and especially humiliating Iraqi prisoners is to be read in this way. It's not simply we, the arrogant Americans, are humiliating others. What Iraqi soldiers experienced there was the staging of the obscene underside of the American military culture. In Full Metal Jacket, it's the character of Joker, played by Matthew Modine, who is close to what we would call a normal soldier, a mesh type of soldier. He has a proper ironic distance. He proves at the end, militarily, the most efficient soldier. Returning back to me, why then will I soon shoot myself? Something went wrong there, but what?
Lock and load!
I did not just run amok.
Order! This is my rifle! There are many like it, but this one is mine!
But I got too directly identified with these obscene rituals. I lost the distance. I took them seriously.
What in the name of Jesus H. Christ are you animals doing in my head?
If you get too close to it, if you over-identify with it, if you really immediately become the voice of this superego, it's self-destructive. You kill people around you, you end up killing yourself.
Oh, shush. So you think Batman's made Gotham a better place?